Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac with me. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
On today's podcast, we're going to be giving our instant reactions to this week's Premier League games, as well we'll preview the upcoming Champions League games. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. We're going to start off with the title talk, and you might be noticing that we don't have our other co-host here. Gio, because we're talking about the title talk, his team is not involved in this conversation, so he's recuperating from, I think, a eventful weekend. But nonetheless, his team, Man United, won. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later, Mac, but we're going to start off with the title talk, and of course, Liverpool face off against Chelsea. On the day of recording, Liverpool won 2-1. A result that I think both flattered Liverpool, but also I think in a sense we get the gist of Liverpool being a step above Chelsea in the pegging order of who's closer to the title. And by that I mean that Chelsea had their spells of possession, had their chances as well, but just didn't look like they were able to take advantage of that possession that they had. A lot of it was more so in their own half, whereas Liverpool were quite lucky to receive a penalty in the first half, and of course the second goal was just a brilliant moment of magic by Curtis Jones that really sealed the game. But apart from that, Mac, of course we can talk about a lot of different talking points. So what were your overall takes from this game?
I agree with a lot of you're saying, whether there isn't too much separating, I felt like, in terms of overall quality. I would even argue is that, look at, if you were to take, let's say if you're a Liverpool fan, would you be willing to switch your midfields and flip-flop them from one team to another? You'd be ecstatic to. If you take away the shirts, if you put Lavia and Caicedo as your double pivot instead of Gravenberch Jones, who had phenomenal games, have done well for Liverpool this season. In terms of individual quality of player, you'd probably argue that Chelsea have the better quality there. But it's that little extra step above, I would argue, in a couple of key areas on the pitch, which we'll definitely chat about, in terms of that's the separation between these two teams, and why, again, as we kind of went into this game talking about, Liverpool are on the cusp of being in the title race, and for now clearly are, whereas Chelsea, this may be too early and too soon, and why I didn't expect them to come away with a result. In terms of, let's say, individual moments that maybe we want to be able to talk about to stand out, firstly, in regards to and how the game really played out, which is a little bit surprising to me, is where, and something I learned from Liverpool watching, is the evolution of Arne Slot and the difference of that he's willing to be able to kind of manage into his game. Whereas in this game, 42% possession, I think he was very much brought into Liverpool as more, I think this is a little bit overused, maybe not like a Pep style, not a complete possession based, but definitely a more, let's say, conservative in possession than Klopp was under his time in Liverpool, where it was a little bit more chaotic, try to get the ball quickly to the front three as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to create those opportunities, where Slot has wanted to kind of take a step back there. But in this game against Chelsea, you felt kind of the reversal in that in some ways, where it's like, no, this is an opportunity in terms of an individual matchup where what Chelsea want to do is try to deny the ball going into Trent in the half spaces, making sure that he can pick it up and kind of create from there. And I think Chelsea did a great job of kind of blocking that area, but they had that extra gear to go to. Oh, you want to be able to do that? What we'll do is we'll be able to play kind of maybe a little bit longer, go over the head of Gusto, Gusto, who's playing more of like an inverted fullback, recognize that space there. From there, that's how we'll be able to break out. That's how we'll be able to try to create their opportunities. Versus Chelsea, what they want to do, of course, is try to be able to stretch the pitch as much as possible with their wingers. Yes, have an inverted fullback come in, but it's really, the whole game plan is to get the ball to Cole Palmer in the final third and see what he can create. But once that's taken away, they didn't really have much else or different evolutions of the game. So that's the difference between their team. Something I learned from Arne Slot and Liverpool in terms of their adjustments, that yes, we can not just stick to a system, but we can play to the individual game, which is great to see. So overall, great competition. I think the better team won because they have that extra gear, but there isn't too much separating these two teams, in my opinion.
I think that's exactly right. On the day, it could have gone either way if we are looking at, of course, the penalty decision, which I still don't necessarily think is a penalty. Of course, Jones was taken down by, I think it was Colwell. It looks like on some angles he gets the ball. On other angles, he does get the player before the ball. You could argue that on the flip side, Sancho had a similar situation for Chelsea, and that wasn't given. Whether we can go back and forth on those decisions, but at the end of the day, we're looking at the shots on target for Chelsea. 12 shots out, chancing Liverpool, but only 2 of them were on target, and one of them, of course, was the goal that kind of came out of nowhere. Great ball by Moises Caicedo, who picked out Nicholas Jackson, who did well to score, and of course he's continuing to score. That's a great sign for Chelsea. But apart from that, like you said, Chelsea's game plan was to look for Cole Palmer, but Liverpool did quite well, and I think maybe they were listening to our conversation last week and looking at closing that space in between the defenders and the midfielders, because Liverpool didn't have a recognized 6, I would say, that's kind of going to be man marking or just marking that space. But because Liverpool played such a high line and they were, like you said, dropping off and allowing Chelsea to have the ball in their own half and just in and around the center circle, it created a situation where there's not enough space for them to play through, and Cole Palmer had to drop deep to try to link up play, and really Liverpool did a great job forcing Chelsea to play out wide. We saw Jadon Sancho and Gusto getting some joy on the left-hand side, but of course, not enough to create anything concrete. And on the right-hand side, I think Madueke played decently well, had some favorable matchups against Robertson, but it didn't make it actually count when it mattered. And so I think I could agree with you that for me, the result would have been fair if it was ended up as a tie, but as a Liverpool fan, I would definitely take the win there. I guess just quickly want to get your opinions on the Jones goal. It was, of course, he's come back. I think over the international break. He has a newborn joining his family, and that is probably something, Mac, maybe you can relate to in the coming future. What a performance by him! He looked like he stood out in place of McAllister, who would have deputized in that position. And that touch on that goal, I think it was a great goal, an individual moment for him. What were your thoughts there?
So I disagree with you. I'll be honest with you on this. In terms of his individual play, he was the best player on the pitch on the day in terms of being able to kind of show into the pocket, be able to bounce passes, to be able to make runs behind. That run from what led to his goal, I thought was phenomenal in terms of, and that was the difference even in terms of Chelsea. Okay, the space isn't in there in the pocket as much necessarily to be able to pick up the ball in every situation. Can we get runs and behinds, be able to create different kind of layers on the pitch in that way and create some separation? And by him being able to do that, and Salah probably is one of the few players on the pitch to be able to see that pass. And there, I want to give Jones his credit. However, I want to say that second goal was absolutely poor goalkeeping from Sanchez, in my opinion. That first touch from Jones was way too far out, and you saw like the trepidation in a lot of ways. I felt like in terms of he paused, thinking maybe I can come get it, maybe I don't, and that slight split second there is what allowed Jones get enough time to make that second touch, which is what took it behind Sanchez at that point. So I disagree with you a little bit that it was quality from him, but for me that goes into more of the ballpark on bad goalkeeping. And again, is another separator that we have in these teams where Keller had a great game. He didn't make any clear big mistakes that was kind of caught out to them, where I would argue Sanchez made a few. So for me, and you're talking about Liverpool's backup second choice goalkeeper. Some may argue third choice goalkeeper because the second one is actually unknown right now, and we'll be back next year. But Chelsea, again, they have everything, but at the same time, they have nothing in some ways, where I would argue two of the most important areas on the pitch, even though their striker did score. Would you really take them at your club? Probably not. And goalkeeping, they have 8, but they don't have a really quality one, right? So they have a lot, but they're still missing keys to their areas of the pitch for me by huge levels. And again, the separator between them and the teams that they want to eventually be chasing. In terms of the overall stats, what we were talking about, a couple of things to point out is when you take a first look at those numbers in terms of possession, shots on target, you may be thinking that Chelsea, they might be a little bit aggrieved by it, but a couple looking a little bit deeper in terms of expected goals, I think Liverpool were about 1.6, whereas Chelsea were only at 0.7. A lot of that takes up in terms of the penalties, so that's fair. But then in terms of big chances created, in terms of quality of those chances, it was 3-2 for Liverpool in their favor. So again, they're the team that's, even though it's under Arne Slot, different management, a lot of these players know each other. It's a well-oiled machine in terms of how to create those opportunities in those key moments and making the right run, making that extra pass when it's needed, or to not make that pass and to drive at your player. So there is that separation between these two teams where I could see why, from maybe a pessimistic Liverpool fan perspective, where you're like, okay, that we may have earned a drop. There is a quality above where definitely they should have won this game, and they did win this game. So great credit to them. And again, further cements, and a lot of their conversation around them was they hadn't played a good team yet. What will happen when they do play a good team? And we've seen what's happened. They're able to adjust, they're able to manage, and they're still able to succeed very well. So credit to them, and they're definitely, considering the other results that happened, which we'll talk about. They are not, the door's just not open from the title race. They're themselves pulling it ajar even more. So credit to them.
Exactly. I do have to agree with you there, because the main question now for us, and of course it's going to be for the rest of the week, in terms of the Premier League, that is at the very least, Liverpool are there for, or very early on, but Liverpool should still be in that conversation for the title. So that's we can all, I guess, pretty much say it's a 3-horse race, including the teams that we're going to talk about now. Just quickly before we move on, about the Arne Slot piece in terms of the way he's sort of shifted the team. I'm not sure if it's whether it's just because he's still very early on. Maybe they just came back from an international break, but it felt like Liverpool, even at home, this game last season, Klopp would have had at least a 10 to 15 minute period where it's just chaos football. Back and forth. Whereas maybe this time around, Slot has introduced a little bit of more of a calm approach to it. And again, surrendering possession to the other team, whereas Liverpool, notoriously known for their high press under Klopp, whether that's good or bad, of course, very early on was very successful. In the middle point of Klopp's tenure at Liverpool, it was actually to the detriment of the team. Teams were very easily able to play through them. And so we'll see what happens, because even though Liverpool got the win, I think there will be definitely more challenging games to come, which we might touch on in the next time we record our podcast. But did want to talk about, of course, you talked about Chelsea's goalkeeping. I did want to mention that I do feel bad for Jose Sa, the Wolves goalkeeper, because he had a great game, but City does what they do. Mac got the winner, none other than your boy John Stones, 2 goals from defenders, that is, from Man City. And they got the win at the end. What are your thoughts overall from, I guess, the title race and, I guess, pertaining to Man City and how they did?
So, for one, I think, if I recall correctly, Wolves had just recently signed a different goalkeeper over the course of the summer. I think it's what's the guy's name, the bloke's name, the bald white dude. His name escapes me, but they had signed a new one over the summer to actually replace Jose Sa, and he had started majority of the games going into this one, whereas now he had come in, Jose Sa, for this game and played phenomenally well. In terms of using a hockey comparison, we live in Canada. He stood on his head. In terms of every save realistically, we felt like he could have made, he did make. Even the one off of Guardiola, which was a top bins goal. Most keepers not even get to hand that. He did, which normally I would say, okay, if you get a hand to it, you should save it. But given the strength, given the power on the shot, and just given kind of the location of the curve, I understand that that's still going to go in, even if you do end up getting a bit there. So absolute quality performance from him, and unfortunate that he wasn't able to walk away with his team for his team at least 8 points. And given the result, even this result puts them further down the table, back down from 19th to 20th in the table. So not a great look from Wolves and on that end, and they've had the most difficult start to the Premier League in terms of the competition they faced. So going forward, they should expect to be able to pick up better results, but things need to get turned around quickly before it starts to snowball. So just quickly on that, on Wolves. In regards to Manchester City, I'm caught between 2 different thoughts here. And I know it's obviously, you listen to the podcast, you can get an idea, hey, Andrew, how do you feel about this? But the major difference is that, is this the same City as old in terms of the first half of the year, kind of malaising your way through it, kind of getting through the muck and the grime and being bored before January rolls around and all the transfers are done and someone lights a fire under their ass and they start playing and killing everybody in front of them? Or based off this individual performance, there was a lot, even though Jose Sa had to make a lot of quality saves, I would argue there wasn't as a normal amount of, let's say, opposition threat level from Manchester City on the Wolves goal. They did what they needed to get done. They did it well because they ended up walking away all 3 points. I think a couple decisions referee-wise went very much in their favor as per City. The game's the game. But I think a player like Erling Haaland, he really didn't have a sniff of the goal the entire game. And the chances having to rely on Guardiola and John Stones to kind of save your bacon in that way, it's not a great look. So even though I could see the argument from both sides, and to be honest, I have a foot planted in both arguments. So I really don't know what to make from them. I think the only way we'll know more is in terms of the top teams they faced. Realistically, they've only faced Arsenal, and they barely got a point from that game. So once these competitions start to pick up, and let's say by that time period where normally they do light a fire under their ass, if they're still kind of struggling, I think this team, kind of what I said in my crazy things may happen predictions, I wouldn't be surprised if they finish third, because they don't feel like the invincible self in some ways, even though they did pick up a win, and credit to them for that. But I still have a lot of questions for this team.
Yeah, it's again, same conversation from the last game they played before the international break against Fulham. They come up with a win. This game they also win, but it's shaky and it's not necessarily convincing. Haaland hasn't scored in, I think, a couple of games now, at the very least, in the Premier League. And Kevin De Bruyne is still, I think, out injured. You have Phil Foden not necessarily started the season so well. So you're looking at where the goals come from. Of course, fantastic goal by Guardiola, and John Stones just being able to get to that cross at the end of literally, I think, the last play of the game. Just got City all 3 points. And I guess the only thing I can say is they just keep doing this. And so until I prove it wrong, I'm still going to back City to get the points over the line and continue doing what they do best until they do hit that inevitable run of form, and then they just kill teams by more than 3 goals every week. So we'll see what happens. I am, though, a little bit, I guess, curious as to how they'll find their goals moving forward. But I guess another team that wasn't able to score this time out, Mac, Arsenal, they lost to Bournemouth 2-0, but I think the game was played out how we would have expected. But of course, the big talking point and what affected apart from the 2 goals that Bournemouth scored, which I think were definitely against the run of play, the Saliba red card, that definitely changed the game. I guess overall thoughts on the red card and or the game? What are your thoughts?
In regards to take a step back and look at, let's go to the individual instance first. In terms of the red card, do I think that's a red card? Yes, I think that's a red card. That's fine. However, the consistency on that call for me is it's the nature of the game. It's why we all love football. It's subjective, right? Because a very similar situation happened in the Chelsea-Liverpool game, and that was given a yellow card, and VAR did not feel it was necessary to overturn. So what's the separator there? I even saw, again, maybe my Twitter feed or X feed is a little bit geared towards Instagram to Arsenal fans, but I even saw a map of where the players were in relation to when the foul occurred, and all the Chelsea players were further away, but yet the red card wasn't given because of something. So I personally believe it is a red card because that is a clear goal scoring opportunity, but there have been a multitude of times where that same exact situation has occurred, and the argument of it's too far away, can't argue, someone may catch up with them, stuff like that, right? And it's not necessarily a clear goal scoring opportunity, even though it's about to be a breakaway. Maybe the under point about is where when I first saw it, I was like, wait, why would Trosha pass it back there? What are you doing? So a mistake from them. So it's really from me on that individual instance, I would say I agree it's a red card, but I'm a little bit annoyed about the inconsistency. In regards to Arsenal themselves, to take a step back and how well they've done, they've only dropped points in the Premier League when they've gotten a red card in a game. So the solution to that would be don't get red cards, which should be fairly simple to do as a professional. Am I going to blame William Saliba? No, it's his first red card in his professional career, arguably a top 2 center back in the Premier League, if not number 1, right? So no arguments there, but it is a consistent theme with an Arsenal team as they actually have the most red cards if you're looking back since I saw that as of the end of December in 2019. They have 18 red cards. The next highest ranked team is Everton with 13. I think combined Liverpool and Manchester City only have 17. So it has been an issue with them. Maybe you contribute a lot to Granit Xhaka in those time periods. I understand that. I get that. But for me, it's something where there has to be, is it a maturity factor? Is it an understanding factor? Or maybe because there's something that they're doing wrong, which there's a clear line that they seem to be kind of crossing too many times where other teams are able to do a better job managing. So that's something they have to address and fix. The last point I would want to say about the individual game is where I think Arteta in his post-match interview, I think was spot on, is where the key moment of the match, it's turned on the Martinelli chance late in the game, is where even though they got a red card, Bournemouth wasn't kind of creating a multitude of opportunities. I would argue that Martinelli chance was the best one there, but he scuffed his opportunity. Kepa makes the save. They go on the next corner away, and Bournemouth end up scoring off a set piece. So for me, in those moments, and football is about moments, even though a lot of people who are new to the game complain it's so long, nothing other happens, but the cruciality of individual moments like that, where if you don't take your chance, it's going to come back and bite you. And unfortunately, in the 2 biggest moments of the game, the red card and Martinelli missing that opportunity, didn't go their way, and that kind of cost them the game.
I think so. Right, you're right there. With regards to the red card, myself personally, I just can't. I can see the rule being applied, but I just can never see a red card being given within 10 yards of the center of the field, because who knows what can happen. Even if the player is, unless the player doesn't have anyone within 10 yards of him, they could slow down, a player can catch up, and anything could really happen. They could mess up the touch. But and so as long as the touch hasn't been taken yet, I can't consider that a red card, clear goal scoring opportunity. So the Liverpool Chelsea one, definitely don't think I think it would have been either Cole or Tosin, but definitely Saliba. I don't think that should be given as a red card. But again, that's something that we kind of have to move past. My other concern.
Quick fun thought there. Just want to go touch on it. Just imagine if they do like a pace check for the striker versus. So let's say if it's like Giroud in that situation, that's not a clear goal scoring opportunity. Like,
yeah, that's
he's
just
fine. But if it's like, Theo Walcott, 100%, that's, do you know what I mean? That would be a good.
Yeah.
Never gonna happen, but that would be a fun factor. They use their pace ratings in comparison to the center back in FIFA. Sorry, continue.
I totally get that, because they're so far ahead, so far from the goal. But that being said, I do have a little bit of a worry for Arsenal, similar in the sense that for City, in the sense that Saka didn't play this game. Raheem Sterling came on and started the game. Trossard and Kai Havertz as the front 3. And yes, Martinelli had the chance to, I think at that time, either level or put Arsenal ahead.
It would have been put Arsenal ahead. Yeah.
But Arsenal, okay. But if Martinelli isn't hitting his top form without Odegaard for an extended period of time, and Saka with him coming back from injury, I'm just a little bit worried, if I'm an Arsenal fan, of can Kai Havertz, Gabriel Jesus, Leandro Trossard pick up the slack of where the other goals will come from. So we'll definitely see how that plays out. Let's take a quick break here, Mac. We'll come back and talk some more about the rest of the Premier League games, and then we'll talk about the upcoming Champions League games taking place this week as well, guys. So stay with us. Welcome back to Also Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now, discussing some more of the Premier League games that took place this weekend. First, Mac, I'll toss it to you first. Out of all the other remaining fixtures, was there one that stood out to you? And discuss with us why that stood out to you.
So I'm actually going to go to we talked about the title race. I'm going to go to the complete other end of the table. And for me, I think my favorite game I watched this weekend, maybe that just might be my personal opinion, because I wanted both Liverpool and Manchester City to lose, and that did not occur, was actually, like I said, the Leicester City win over Southampton 3-2. I thought that was a phenomenal game to watch. Probably the best game across the Premier League in terms of action, in terms of consequences, in terms of drama. I absolutely love to see it was pure scenes there, and in terms of exactly what played out in that game. This, based off the result, if we're just going to skip to the end of the game, this moved Leicester City up to 9 points, 14th in the table, kept Southampton down. At that point, they were actually last place until Wolves kind of overtake them with a worse goal difference. So the impact that this type of game will have for both these teams is a clear line of, okay, hey, for Leicester, we're in this competition now. They're going ahead to be able to face Nottingham Forest next. They could be in a position where they're picking up points in back-to-back games, and that's a phenomenal result for them. Or Southampton, now after that loss, a game that they needed to win, they're going to face Manchester City, so they should expect to lose that one too. Hopefully not, but they should expect to lose it. So to skip right over to the consequences of this type of result is where these two teams, when they began the season, if there was games that were circled on the calendar as must-wins, it was these ones. And Leicester coming out with the win is absolutely huge for them. It gives a huge boost to their chances of being able to stay up. And then just go to individual, I guess, moments in the game. I think a couple moments that stand out to me, and something that I guess a lot of Leicester City fans might be screaming for. Maybe it's a little bit unfair in some cases. In terms of Soumare not being able to necessarily start the game, whereas in terms of the impact that he had from when he did come on, I know he's a recent signing and they kind of just slowly try to bake him into the team. But I think what he's done has been phenomenal, and as well as Fatawu, sorry, apologies. I was watching Match of the Day, and Gary Lineker was talking about is that's his children's favorite player right now in terms of the impact that they would have, and him not starting games himself. And I think he's the one that led to the Jamie Vardy goal in terms of the penalty, as well as creating the next goal afterwards to be able to kind of seal off the game. So for me, I think they're starting to find players coming in with great performances. And I think for Leicester, that may push them in a kind of a conversation where at the beginning of the season, they maybe felt that they didn't have quality. But if they have one or two breakout stars that are to come on and make an impact like that, I think they'll be in a good position by the end of the season. Whereas for Southampton, it just further heaps on pressure because they had a lead, they should have seen it out, and they kind of pulled an Everton in some ways and bottled it. And they have no one to blame this up because it was their own mistakes. Going into kind of getting a red card as well to give that penalty to lose that opportunity. So for me, it was the most consequential game that happened outside of the title race, and it was the most exciting game. So I'm very happy with that result and how it played out. What about you? Is there a game that stands out to you, or any comments on the Leicester versus Southampton? Sorry, Ray, I think your voice is cutting out for me. Apologies.
Sorry about that. I definitely want to mention a couple of things about this game. Big shout out to Kyle Walker-Peters, who totally forgot that he was a Southampton player. Of course, Southampton wasn't in the Premier League last season, and myself mainly watched the Premier League, and so he wasn't in my radar at the so much last season. But the way he cooked James Justin for the first Southampton goal, that was cool to see. Though the same, and Southampton went up 2-0 at halftime, so that was great for them. Playing at home against also a newly promoted team would have been great. But the way they kind of fell apart at the end and were put to the sword by none other than House of Footy favorite Jordan Ayew is something inexcusable. And I think it's gonna hurt them a lot. Whereas for Leicester, like you said, it was Fatawu that came on and really performed very, very well to help set up. I think, if I'm not mistaken, actually had a hand in all three Leicester City goals. So great to see that, and just looking also at the depth that they do have in Harry Winks coming on, Bobby Decordova-Reid, and of course aforementioned Jordan Ayew coming on as well. That's not a bad set of subs to have in the Premier League, right? So Leicester will definitely look to hopefully continue this run of form. I will then move on to another game, Mac, one that we previewed in our last recording, and that's, of course, Spurs versus West Ham. Spurs winning 4-1 in this game. And I guess to kind of bookend the start and the finish of this game, none other than one of also House of Footy's favorite players, Mohamed Kudus. Great job to get on score sheets to open up the scoring actually in this game, and then just I don't understand why he would get involved in that situation to get a red card when West Ham were I guess soundly beaten by that point. It's just something that doesn't make sense to me. But on the flip side, Spurs, it's a team that I think we talked about, I think, during the international break. I do have some high hopes for them because we can see there are some positives that can happen for this team. Heung-min Son returned as well, so he caused some troubles, causing the own goal from Areola, and of course scoring one himself. And just continuing to even though they conceded first, continuing to perform well. I think Brennan Johnson and Solanke, even though they didn't get on the score sheet, continuing to take away and play well, and we'll see what can happen from there, because I think now we have sort of a defined front three in Son, Solanke, and Johnson. We'll see if they can continue that run of form for Spurs, but West Ham, not great to start. Now losing 4-1 in this timeout, 15th in the table, 2 wins, 2 draws, and 4 losses. I don't know if it's too early, but are there questions about Lopetegui? I'm not sure. Any thoughts on this game, Matt? Before we turn over our attention to the Champions League?
In terms of the major teams that we talked about, the big six, I think that they, aside from Manchester United, needed to win the most in some ways. After a recent result, again, they won against Manchester United. They lost their last game, coming back up with a great performance. Lost against Brighton after being up 2-0. So having a performance like this, where you're down 1-0, you have to claw back and fight your way back up, and I would argue excel, where they consistently created great opportunities for their offensive players. I think this was a much needed result. Glad to see. I think Lopetegui is going to soon start being asked questions of him, because this was supposed to be a clear change after the David Moyes era, a step up potentially in terms of how they would play on the football pitch, and get results throughout the Premier League season, and not just in terms of results, because David Moyes, that was a hit and miss. The system was a little bit kind of dull, and that was a major complaint as well. But I haven't seen too much evolution there, and it'll be interesting to see how it does perform. I do love as we're wrapping up the rest of the games. I should have looked this up before the podcast, but 5 red cards across all games, and we still have one more to play tomorrow. I think that's a prime Ray and Gio betting odds. Is what we call it?
Absolutely.
There was a double red card in one of the games. And that was Aston Villa Fulham. So again, for me, I'm lovely to see that, the chaos in all of this, and again, the result for Tottenham West Ham just further added to it. And then my last part is, I don't know if you've seen the meme of the guy that goes around and slaps up everyone in his family, and everyone's like, even goes to the kids and the baby. That I seen a replacement of Kudus doing that exact same thing. Absolutely killed me, and I'm here for it. So great result. Again, on the serious note, Spurs absolutely needed it, and it'll be interesting to see if Lopetegui starts making the short odds of first man to get sacked in the Premier League.
Yeah, of course, again, guys, we do not condone violence,
No.
so please don't loop us into that group. Though, in our next part of our conversation, we might be talking about 2 teams that are very fierce in their rivalry. And I think, Mac, you before we started this podcast, you said there's really only 2 games that we're going to be looking forward to for the Champions League this week, and that's I think it's going to be Dortmund versus Real Madrid and Bayern Munich versus Barcelona. Interesting note, Real Madrid and Barcelona face each other next weekend, and so the teams that they're facing are actually also rivals in the Bundesliga. So I guess I'll let you cook first, Mac. Unless there's any other games out of these 2 games, which one are you looking forward to the most, and why?
Ooh, okay, so what I want to talk about, because the answer, if I had to answer honestly to your question, I wouldn't pick this game. But what I want to talk about is this stat, and it's one of the most memeable stats. It's a funny one. It's been a consistent one brought up to a lot of Barcelona fans. So Barcelona have lost their last six games against Bayern Munich, conceding 22 goals and failing to score in all of their last 4 defeats. In their entire history, they've only lost more consecutive games in all competitions against Real Madrid, which was between 1962 and 1965. So that's 7 in a row that they lost. So a team built up on success, winning Champions League, winning La Ligas, and being a standard bearer of excellence in the world of football. They have an Achilles heel and has been Bayern Munich. Will this trend continue? That for me is what I'm most excited about. A lot of the players there have no attachment to many of those games. Realistically, if you look through the squad, there has been almost a complete reshuffling of the major players in Barcelona. But is it in, as Gio might say about Spurs and losing, is it in their DNA? Like what is something that's going on there, right? So that's what I'm most looking forward to. At the same time, with Bayern, after the result against Aston Villa, this is now a game where, even though this would be, I think it's the fourth game through the group stage, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
Then the table started to shake out, and teams are going to be in a position where they need to start picking up points. And even though, as a fan, you might be more excited, like, oh, these key matchups, this is great. It hasn't necessarily felt as much of consequence because there are more games in this league phase, right, than what would be in a group stage. But the bill is coming due, and if Bayern find themselves outside the top 8, they have more games on their schedule. That I think potentially may cause them trouble because they're trying to compete on multiple fronts. So very excited to see what happens in this game. There's a lot riding on for both teams, not just in terms of the individual aspect, but in terms of pride and what this matchup has previously done over the last couple of years. So very excited for that game.
Yeah, quickly on this game, I think it's going to be very interesting because Barcelona currently, actually on their recording, 5-1 winners against Sevilla. Started the season quite well domestically. Robert Lewandowski got 2 extra goals today, and he's looking like he's not done yet. So that's a great sign for Barcelona. Though my thinking here is Bayern Munich, and of course he's former Bayern Munich player. That's going to be an interesting battle. However, Bayern Munich themselves are not lacking in the striker position, and the fact that they have none other than Harry Kane, and of course, I would put out my neck and say easily the best striker in the world at the moment. Got a hat-trick last time out against Stuttgart, and will definitely look to get on the board against Barcelona, who I think, to credit to them, not to discredit their great start to the season, I think are still kind of shaky at the back, and I think Harry Kane will have a great time playing against Barcelona this week, and it's going to be a very interesting game because Bayern, like you said, need that win. But Barcelona are going to look to... I think they themselves lost to Monaco early on in this competition as well. So they, of course, both teams looking to battle out and finish as high in the table as possible. Just going to be a very interesting game to watch. On the flip side, I guess the direct rivals in Real Madrid and Borussia Dortmund, that's going to be an interesting game to watch as well because it looks like Real Madrid, even though both teams actually 2-1 winners in their domestic league games this weekend, Madrid are not looking as convincing. Have already, I think, already lost in the Champions League this year already. Whereas Dortmund, I think, if I'm not mistaken, are first in the table, flying high, scoring goals, and even pulling out late winners through the likes of Sergio Guirassy, who made the move to Dortmund last year and had a great season in the Bundesliga. That's going to be interesting because if Dortmund get to a hot start and score first, I do think Madrid will struggle, especially because Madrid are at home. There's going to be a lot of fans getting on their backs about the performances. I don't think Mbappe and Vinicius have started as well. And even though I think Jude Bellingham will be fit for this game, a lot of history there between these two clubs. Of course, they faced each other in the Champions League final last year. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. So Mac, final thoughts on this and maybe any other games from the Champions League coming up this week?
No other games, but I do have some. So just to correct myself, this will be the third match day for the Champions League. And again, as we talked about previously a couple of weeks back when Real Madrid did lose, I think that's going to be an interesting part is where this Galacticos era, where they have all of kind of, you've said, to use them all, you have all the Infinity Stones, but do you have like the correct gauntlet to put them in to make them all work together at the same time? That's going to be the question, because they've already suffered a loss in the Champions League. There are 3 points back in La Liga, if reading this correctly, as of right now. Not a huge difference, but what we would have expected based off the talent they have at their disposal is to overwhelm teams, and they haven't done that. And looking even just at their goals for in La Liga in comparison to Barcelona's at 33, Real Madrid are only at 21. So this hasn't been an all-encompassing, devastating threat where they're just walking in, as we've seen, let's say, Man City of old and tearing teams a new one and winning 5-0. It's still much a beginning of the season, early days. They still have to learn how to play together, but that chemistry is not going to come instantaneously. That's something that I love about football, is where you have to earn that. You have to build that. It takes time. But the tough part is their fans are not going to be willing to give them it if it doesn't go in their favor. So a game like this, which they are expected to win and win comfortably, if they don't come out and kind of command that presence, they're going to get on the back, and that's only going to further the field for Borussia Dortmund, who are coming back for revenge in a lot of ways. In terms of the last time that they played together was the final, so they're going to come back in and have something to fight for, and it'll be very interesting to see if, and I'd be excited to see if this result doesn't go Real Madrid's favor by them not winning, what types of impact they may have on both these teams for the rest of not just the league phase, but the rest of the Champions League run in, where maybe one is not considered as much of a threat and one is maybe considered more of a threat this year.
Yeah, definitely is something to keep an eye out for, especially because, of course, the Clásico is next weekend. So we'll, of course, cover all the results in our next podcast. But, guys, this concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well. houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be Friday, when we review this week's Champions League games and also preview the upcoming Premier League games next weekend. But until then, thank you, Mac, for joining us.
So the only reason why Gio wasn't here for all you listeners is because he wanted Ten Hag out, so he wanted Manu to lose. So it didn't happen. So apologies. Thank you.
Don't worry. We'll hear from Gio soon enough. But guys, thank you. Have yourselves a good night.